We have with us Jason Gale, VP of Content and Production for Tan Books, talking about the new book by Father Joseph Spence entitled Living the Little Way, 6 Keys to the Spirituality of St. Thérèse. Jason, thanks for coming on the Catholic Morning Show again.
Hey, thanks for having me on.
It is wonderful to have you with us. So, one of the things I find most interesting in the sort of marketing that you guys put out for this book is written in light of recent church recognition, including Pope Francis's C'est la confiance, and then UNESCO's acknowledgement of St. Thérèse as a World Heritage Person. This work shows why her science of love is now more relevant than ever. It's interesting to think that even on a worldwide stage, someone as, I would say, profoundly indicative of French Catholic spirituality is considered a World Heritage Person. What to make of that sort of declaration?
Yeah, so I mean, for St. Thérèse, for somebody who only lived for 24 years, the impact that she's had is just absolutely tremendous for the spiritual life of the church, and I'd say especially today for laity. I mean, so many people have picked up on her spirituality and kind of really diving into her life. Her parents have been declared saints, so it's just a family affair for I think everybody.
So when it comes to this little book, and as always, one of the things I always love to attest anytime we have Tan Books, speaking from my own experience with you guys, it is a beautiful book, nicely bound. It's something that is just begging to be taken into a Eucharistic chapel and meditated upon during prayer and things like this. So what is the sort of organizing principle? Why 6 keys to the Little Flower's spirituality?
Yeah, so a big point, is many times, Saint Thérèse, her spirituality kind of gets just generalized into the little way, but there's a lot more depth there to her spirituality, and so Father Spence here, who's he's a member of the Franciscan family of Mary Immaculate, he really brings kind of the depth in an accessible way to the modern reader. Of just diving into how can we understand a more full grasp? How can we get a full grasp of her spirituality? And so he goes through these 6 keys, talking about, yes, her little way, but also her experiences because her full name was Saint Thérèse of the Child Jesus and of the Holy Face. So her devotion to the Holy Face and the Child Jesus really played a central impact. She had a great love for souls. She wanted, and this is kind of the paradox of being a cloistered nun, is she really wanted to become a nun for the salvation of souls. So she's going to go be locked away for her life for the salvation of souls, and a lot of it had to do with her devotion to the Holy Face, offering reparation for the sins of the world and her own sins as well.
I think
next he goes into... Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I was just going to say, especially with the Holy Face, I think sometimes this is a historical element people might miss out. It's at this time that, for instance, part of the Holy Face devotion really does become central in a lot of places in Europe. If I'm not mistaken, this has to do with the Shroud of Turin and things like this. But, we kind of take it as a matter of course of like, oh, there's images of the Holy Face, both, like traditional painted ones, but then like from the Shroud and things like this. But this really was a sort of elemental revival, especially in France, that, maybe is an element, like you said, because the little way, and like you said, rightly so, it's very powerful in people's minds. But this begins because of sort of her embodying what had kind of been a revival or even sort of a new beginning for that devotion in France.
Absolutely, and the central image for the Holy Face was the veil of Veronica. I mean, and when we stop and think about it for a sec, that our Lord left this image of His face for Veronica and for the whole world and the rest of the Church as a sign of love and something for meditation. And so this entire devotion around the Holy Face, really grew during this time in France. And so the Martin family, the whole Martin family, really took on this devotion. And we know, at least from the age of 12, that she had this. She painted a copy of Veronica's veil and kind of had it placed in their house. And so this is a central aspect to understanding, the part of the little way.
And when you go, like now, of course, to say that about that also is the child Jesus, that you start to get some of these other elements to understanding Christ as a spouse, her relationship with the Blessed Virgin Mary, and then even the little way. So maybe speak more to that as well.
Yeah, she had, I believe it was her first Holy Communion card? She had one of her holy cards, and it was an image of Mary with the child Jesus. And then she had another one of her favorites was just the child Jesus with a lamb. And so this really points to this kind of spiritual childhood to Jesus, and this also goes into some of her own experience with her parents and stuff, with losing her mom at such an age. And so the devotion to the child Jesus really formed her littleness, her smallness of going to Jesus constantly as, relating to him as a child. And then also feeding into, because she lost her mother so young, she was only 4 years old, and then her wet nurse really became a mother figure, then her sister Pauline. And so Father Spence does an amazing job then of really tracing kind of her maternal influences for her whole life. And then, of course, her sister Pauline was a sister. Her eldest sister Marie was a sister as well. And then also Mother Marie, the prioress, was also her spiritual mother. And so this forms also her spirituality with and her relationship with the Blessed Mother, of really taking that on because she had experienced these losses of a maternal figure as well.
Well, in that sort of outplaying of her life, too, you get maybe the other two elements, her fraternal charity, the mystery of her passion and death. As you already pointed out, her life was actually very short and intense life, but that she drew so much material from even its short duration that maybe sometimes we get just the high-level account of her life, but Father here in this book does a great job of showing how this is indicative of her spirituality.
Yeah, absolutely. And her, her fraternal charity, she wrote a lot about in her letters and things. She wrote a lot about, her struggles with, some of the other sisters, which is I just think it's such a profound insight that, and an insight that we usually don't get into saints and into the life that happens, behind the cloistered walls. And so this fraternal charity that she practiced, many sisters would later, who were, some of them who admittedly were mean to her, they came and they spoke of her charity towards them as completely undeserving, and in a beautiful way spoke of Christ's love for us, when, it's not deserved, it's pure grace.
So when it comes to TAN, in general, doing books, you guys do all sorts of stuff, of course, from children's books, just saying, all the way to reprints of originals and things like this. But decidedly, right? We've seen in the past year or two, really upping your ability to put out spirituality books clearly intended for people to utilize in their meditations. So I think this book fits into that general idea. And what's the thought process behind that this is a section of, the Catholic book trade that TAN is hoping to really fill with great titles to choose from?
Yeah, for us, the biggest things is, what are the books about the saints, and what are the books that the saints have read? How can we dive in and make accessible some of these great writings that are, in this case, it's not really lost, it's very popular, but how can we go and how can we dive deeper into that, and how can we, look at the entire intellectual tradition of the Church? There's so many gems out there, whether it be, lesser well-known people like Louis of Granada, or how do we understand something that's as popular as Saint Thérèse? And so for us, the focus is on how to be a saint, and the best way to do that is to imitate Christ through the imitation of the saints as well. And so that really forms a lot of our mission and what we do and how we choose books.
Well, before we let you go, if people want, of course, not only find this book, but look into the other array of tan books and what you guys have in your new offerings, where can they go find out all that information?
Yeah, the best place to go is tanbooks.com. You can also find all our books on Amazon. We always like to plug our local trade stores. So if you have a local Catholic bookstore, please go visit them and see what we have there.
Absolutely wonderful. The new book is Living the Little Way, 6 Keys to the Spirituality of St. Thérèse. It is by Father Joseph Spence, but we had a chance to talk about it with Jason Gale, VP of Content and Production for Tan Books. Jason, thanks for coming on the Catholic Morning Show.
Hey, thanks for having me on.